This episode of Now This Is Lit is brought to you by Audible. Check the link in the description to get your first Star Wars audiobook free. Everyone loves free things. Click that link. Do it. This show is also brought to you by our patrons. If you want to support the show in a different way, with just $1 a month, you can join our Patreon at patreon.com/StarWarsLitPod. You can get a sticker. You can get access to an exclusive show that we do every month that's wild and chaotic and fun and something you can only get by becoming a member of the Patreon. There'll be so many more perks very, very soon. But for now, do you want a sticker? Do you want a sticker that has a Now This Is Lit logo? Because it's fantastic and I love them. But I also want to give them away because there's just a stack of stickers on my desk. So if you want one, $1 a month. Patreon.com/StarWarsLitPod. A long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. You're listening to Now This Is Lit, a podcast about Star Wars books, the people who make them, and the readers who just can't get enough of them. I'm your host, Meg Dowell. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm so excited to have Tessa Gratton on the show this week to talk about Defy the Storm and writing for Star Wars and the High Republic and so many other great things. I hope you enjoy. You started out writing in Star Wars with a short story in Stories of Jedi and Sith, appropriately, and you've since written so many wonderful stories throughout Star Wars as a whole. And you've written another one, and that's why we're here.
Yeah, that's right.
What has your experience been like to be able to explore all these different eras and different characters and all these different stories in Star Wars?
Oh, it has been very exciting and daunting. I will say the story in the Jedi and Sith anthology is a real outlier for me. Other than that story, which is about Yoda and Palpatine after the Return of the Jedi, everything else I've written has taken place during the High Republic era. And, bouncing between the current timeline, so to speak, and then the prequel for everything we did on phase 2. And so I really feel like mostly what I've done is this High Republic, and the project itself is so expansive because of the timeline of how of everything takes place over something like 100 and some years. And we're talking about generations and family sagas, all these things that Star Wars in general really likes to dig into. And so it's been really cool getting to explore an era that pretty much didn't exist in the storytelling the whole time I was growing up with the various kinds of media. And I read all of the expanded universe books that came out before the late 90s. And so I was always a big Star Wars reader, in addition to being a fan of the original trilogy, which was pretty much the only film TV stuff that I had as a kid. It was just that trilogy and then all of the writing. So I'm really thrilled to be able to jump into that and be one of the creators now.
It's so cool to hear about all of the authors that are now writing in Star Wars who loved Star Wars before they were writing in Star Wars. It's really full circle of I loved these stories when I was younger, and now this is what I get to do. That must be really cool.
It is. It's also really weird, partly because, I get asked pretty frequently now if this was always a dream of mine. And it really wasn't, because it never occurred to me that it could be.
Yeah.
I was a writer and, wrote all kinds of what would now be considered like fan fiction if I had posted it anywhere, but we didn't have the internet.
Yeah.
And I was too young for the kinds of like to really know to look for the kinds of fan spaces that were available in the late 80s and early 90s. But, you know, I was writing like tangential Star Wars and Star Trek and X-Files, in addition to like my own original world fantasy. And it just never occurred to me that I could do it professionally someday. So when people started, like my peers started working for Star Wars, it still didn't even really occur to me as something that would be like, oh, I should see if I can get a Star War. So it's, but also really fundamentally weird for me still.
I can do that. I can write a Star Wars.
Right, right. That's something that just happens to me now.
Yeah. I did it again. This is
Right.
happening again. You got to work on Defy the Storm. I always get that name wrong. The book is right. It's right back there. I always get it wrong. You worked on Defy the Storm with Justina, and that's not the first time you've done that. And I wanted to hear more about what your experiences and your process is for collaborating on these books because, you know, they've done it a couple times now in the High Republic where two authors are working on this book, but you don't necessarily, the reader doesn't necessarily know who wrote what. Apparently, I've learned from social media, the authors also sometimes don't remember who wrote what, which is fair. And so I am curious to hear more about that process and what it's like to do that very close one-on-one collaboration to get this story from two of you.
Definitely. So Justina and I have been friends for a long time, and we decided we wanted to write a book together before Project Luminous was at least a glimmer in Justina's eye. There might have been people at like Lucasfilm who were already, you know, gearing up to put something together. But we talked about just writing books for fun. Our separate, like individual Tessa Gratton and Justina Ireland books tend to be really weird or politically intense. And we write about things that really upset us in the real world. One of the reasons we're friends is because we're both really angry about a lot of things all the time. And so we wanted to just write a book for fun. Just like, what do we love about books? Let's just see if we can not stress out about a book for once. And eventually that led us to write the fantasy, YA fantasy that became Chaos and Flame. But we were interrupted in that process because Justina was brought on to Project Luminous at the very beginning with the original 5 authors. And she pretty quickly began her campaign, like deep behind the scenes, to convince me that what I actually wanted to write with her was a Star Wars novel. I was really resistant at first because of the pressure. Like it just, even thinking about it sounded like immense pressure. And, you know, we were supposed to write a book together that was just fun, pure fun. And it sounded too stressful to me. But, you know, after the High Republic launched, it was so cool. And, you know, I read a bunch of the books and was hearing all these stories from Justina in particular. And, you know, it sounded better and better. And she said, okay, Tess, we're getting ready to do phase 2, and we're going back in time. And so you would be able to like create your own characters with me. And I really have to tell you, I know a little bit about what this book that I'm writing, that I want you to write with me, is going to be about. And I have 3 words for you: kissing, cults, monsters. And I was like, oh, those are magic words. How can I say no to writing a book with Justina that has those three things, which are some of my favorite things. And it's plus a Star Wars book. And so I jumped into the High Republic knowing that my first book was going to be a collaboration with Justina. And in addition to liking working with her in general, the biggest benefit to that for me was she basically knew how to do it all. You know, she knew how the outline process worked. She knew about all the story calls. She could tell me about, how everything worked and the kind of things that we should push and the kind of thing that's like, well, I've fought this battle before. We're not going to win it this time either. And instead, let's try and do this. Like, so she really knew the ins and outs. And I was able to basically just like coast in and have an incredibly great, dynamic, fun time when I managed to forget that I was inventing Jedi. So for Path of Deceit, it was really smooth from my point of view. I hope it was from everyone else's point of view, because Justina really just like cut away all of the like stress, and she was there if I needed to really be like, oh my gosh, I'm really like freaking out about this. And also Zoraida Cordova had joined by that time. And so Zoraida and I have been friends for a while also. And Zoraida and I got pretty good at like sidebarring and being like, oh my God, are you freaking out? I'm freaking out, because we were both longtime Star Wars fans. Yeah, that definitely only barely like skimmed the surface of your question. And I'm happy to get into more nitty gritty details if you would like, but
Sure.
it's not necessary. Okay.
If you'd like to, go for it.
Well, like you mentioned, a lot of people seem to be very interested in like how we decided who is going to write what, and how are we going to make it so that hopefully readers won't notice like a jump in voice and that kind of thing. And on a certain level, like the Star Wars books there's kind of a Star Wars voice that most of the time you're aiming towards, and it's that like, third person space adventure kind of voice. And we, for Path of Deceit and Defy the Storm, we did it fairly differently because the books required different things. And with Path of Deceit, we knew we were going to have three main point of view characters, and any other points of view were going to be pretty small. I think we really only had two other points of view in that one. And so we divided it really evenly. We each took one of the characters and then shared the third character and like went through and color coded the outline so we knew who was writing what and made sure we were writing an equal amount. And then we wrote it in linear order, like chapter by chapter, so that when Justina would write a chapter, I would read it before I wrote the next chapter to see what she had done, like the details that she had put in, so that I could pull on those, so that hopefully we could end up with really good pacing and, really be weaving together as we were writing to hopefully hide the fact that it was two writers writing the book. And it went really, really smoothly. It was different with Defy the Storm because we had to have more than three point of view characters. And we had a lot more that we needed to get done in the book. And so we really played around with that outline a lot more and went back and forth with it and like rearranged things frequently, even after we'd written a lot of the different parts. But we still tried to keep doing it in like reading order, even though at multiple times multiple characters go off and separate from each other. So what Jordana is doing doesn't necessarily have anything to do with what Vernestra is doing for a good chunk of the book, but we still wanted to do our best to get the pacing right. And then we took turns like revising the whole thing in the hopes of making it read really as smoothly as possible. So it was just a bigger, more ambitious book in a lot of ways than Path of Deceit, which at its heart is just about kissing and cults and monsters. So yeah.
It really does. It feels so seamless. Where like, that two authors have written this book, but it feels all one cohesive thing. And it's very well done. And this is probably one of my favorite High Republic books, possibly so far. Just because a lot did have to happen and a lot of characters had to do a lot of different things. But I got to the end of the book. We won't spoil the very
Yeah.
last page of the book, but I closed the book and I was like, how dare you, both of you. In a good way, though.
Thank you. Thank you.
I will ask you one more thing, which is I want to know what you love most about working on the High Republic books.
There is so much that I love about it. And I think that I have to say two things.
Yes.
Because they're very different and they speak to very different parts of what I love about being a writer as a whole and being a Star Wars writer specifically. And one of those things is the readership. I have never experienced this much reaction to anything I've written. I so far have mostly been writing like my own little niche, weird fantasy books. And I was intimidated to have a Star Wars book out there because I know there's a huge fandom out there. But it has just been absolutely incredible. The response from readers, the fan art, the cosplay, all of these things just absolutely take my breath away, like once a week. And it's just amazing. And the way that so many of you do read all of it and engage with all of it. And, it's absolutely incredible. And I love it so much. And on a more like writer level, I love that the High Republic takes place in the history of the media and books that I read when I was younger. And then, all of these TV shows and everything. I love being able to play with history and like the memory, like what do people remember? What don't they remember? What kind of history has been forgotten? What history has been erased? Because there's a lot of erasure that went on with the Empire and like the fall of the Jedi Order. So I love getting to look for new pockets of, okay, well, how did the Jedi deal with this kind of thing when they had a whole infrastructure and they could support each other and had resources and things like that. So I really like delving into those aspects of history, even outside the Jedi Order, but like all the way that the Force was thought of, during the phase 2 of the High Republic, when there were still so many different groups and cults on Jeddah, for example, actively engaging with each other about the Force. And that's just all wiped out by the time we get to the prequel trilogy and the original trilogy. And so I love exploring the history of it. So those two things.
Oh, those are two very good things. We are so glad me, whoever listening maybe, are so glad that you are writing in this era and are part of this huge storytelling thing happening. What are words? We're so glad to have you here, and you're not done yet, and that's also very exciting.
Yeah.
So we'll be talking about that.
I'm so glad to be here.
Yes.
And I'm really excited for people to get their hands on Temptation of the Force.
Yes. Oh, I don't even have it yet. I need it.
I'm pretty sure nobody has it yet.
Yeah.
So
we'll get there soon. And
Yep.
it's also been great to have you here. And you know, you being a Star Wars author, I've wanted to talk to you for a minute, and we finally made it happen. And it's been
Yes.
great. It's been great.
Yeah, I'm really happy to be here and chat with you.
Now This Is Lit is part of the Faraway Fandom Network. It is produced by Devor Mondum and written, hosted, and edited by me. Jose Jimenez designed our podcast art. You can keep up with the show on our Substack at Now This Is Lit and find the show wherever you get your podcasts. There are many ways to support the show, and all of those ways are in the show description. But the newest way is to become a member of our Patreon for $1 a month. You can get access to an exclusive show and a sticker, and hopefully so many more perks to come very soon. Your support, no matter how you choose to support the show, means everything to me, so thank you. For more book reviews and Star Wars Book Celebration, follow Star Wars Book Reviews on Instagram and TikTok.